These ancient brick ruins at Nalanda are the physical remnants of a massive intellectual battleground. For a millennium, Indian philosophy was defined by an intense, highly formalized epistemological war between Buddhist logic and the Nyaya Vaisheshika school of realism. This is the cover of the Atma Tattvasiveka, a 10th century treatise by the logician Udayanacharya. Written in Maithili, this specific text served as the definitive logical instrument that systematically dismantled the reigning Buddhist paradigm of the era. We are examining Udayana's dense Sanskrit arguments through a specific modern lens, Gajendra Thakur's recent translation into Maithili. This translation tests the limits of language. Maithili is frequently categorized as a regional language or folk speech. By successfully translating Udayana's mathematically dense classical logic, Thakur demonstrates the structural capacity of the language to process extreme philosophical abstraction. Returning this rigorous realist ontology to its native regional language rescues the text from centuries of scholastic isolation. The arguments are once again accessible to the culture that originally produced them. This flickering pulse represents the core of Buddhist ontology, momentariness. It is the assertion that all reality exists for only a single instant. There is no enduring substance, only a subjective, rapidly decaying stream of distinct events. Udayana's Nyaya Vaisheshika position operates on strict realism. It argues for a universe built on continuous, enduring substances and an external reality that exists entirely independent of our perception of it. To defend this realist universe, Udayana targets 4 specific pillars of Buddhist thought: the doctrine of momentariness, the linguistic theory of exclusion, the concept of subjective idealism, and finally, the doctrine of no self. We will follow Udayana's step-by-step logical derivation. By breaking down his exact arguments, we can see how an enduring reality is constructed, starting from the physics of causality all the way up to the metaphysics of human consciousness. The Buddhist argument for momentariness begins with a rule about contradiction. A real object must be momentary because a single entity cannot simultaneously possess the capacity and the incapacity to produce an effect. This split-screen model illustrates their classic example. On the left is a seed stored in a grain. It produces nothing. On the right is a seed planted in a field, actively producing a sprout. If the stored seed lacks capacity and the planted seed possesses capacity, Buddhist logic dictates they must be 2 completely different, momentary entities. Udayana counters this by defining capacity differently. The capacity to produce, or seedhood, is a permanent, inherent property. It endures across time, completely regardless of whether a sprout is being produced in a given instant. The delay in production is not caused by a lack of innate capacity. It is caused by the absence of auxiliary causes. When water and soil are introduced to the equation, the enduring seed immediately triggers the sprout output. By drawing a strict line between an object's inherent capacity and external auxiliary causes, Udayana preserves the continuity of physical objects. Without this stability, basic laws of physics and causal prediction collapse. Next, Udayana attacks apoha, the Buddhist linguistic theory of exclusion. This theory argues that words do not denote real positive things. Instead, a word only signifies the exclusion of other things. Under this framework, the word cow literally means the exclusion of non-cows. This flowchart demonstrates Udayana's primary logical strike against apoha, the charge of mutual dependence. If we define a cow as not a non-cow, we are locked in a fatal circular flaw. To successfully exclude a non-cow, the human mind must first possess a positive, real-world cognition of what a cow actually is. You cannot negate a concept you have not first positively defined. Human language and meaningful activity are anchored in positive, enduring reality. We act upon objects because they exist, not because they are arbitrary negative constructions. The third target is Vijnanavada, or subjective idealism. This school relies on the rule of co-apprehension, claiming that human cognition and the perceived external object are identical, simply because they are experienced simultaneously. To refute this, Udayana introduces the paradox of variegated cognition. Look at this geometric shape. It possesses multiple contradictory properties. It is simultaneously half blue and half yellow. Cognition and the object are the exact same thing. Observing both blue and yellow would force the single act of cognition to split into contradictory states. A single awareness would become impossibly one and many at the exact same time. Cognition is merely the illuminator. It remains distinct from the external objects it illuminates. The external world exists independently of human consciousness. Objective reality does not collapse into pure phenomenology. Finally, Udayana confronts the Buddhist doctrine of no self, the argument that human identity is a momentary flowing stream of consciousness with no enduring core substance. Udayana builds his proof on a simple psychological fact: recognition. We routinely say, "I am remembering today what I experienced yesterday." This timeline tracks an entity at the moment of experience and the moment of memory. True recognition requires absolute, unbroken identity between the entity that experienced the event and the entity that remembers it later. The moral stakes here are absolute. Under the law of karma, if the self perishes every second, the entity that performs an action is dead before the consequence arrives. You would lose the results of your own actions and suffer the consequences for actions you did not perform. Human agency, the legal system, and basic moral responsibility require the foundation of a continuous, unified self. Udayana's 4 refutations lock together to form an integrated realist ontology. He secures the physical substance of the seed, the objective reality of the external world, and the continuous identity of the human self. But this logical rigor serves a specific telos. It is the foundation for climbing the ladder of meditation to achieve apavarga, ultimate liberation. In the strict Nyaya definition, liberation is not the attainment of eternal pleasure. Pleasure requires physical senses and a body. Instead, true liberation is the absolute cessation of all suffering, achieving total, undisturbed equilibrium. The pursuit of logical truth is the direct mechanism for escaping the cycle of suffering. Accurate epistemology is required for existential freedom. These ancient palm leaf manuscripts carry the original Sanskrit text. For centuries, this dense logic was locked away from the general public. Gajendra Thakur's translation into Maithili serves as the vital bridge to retrieve it. By utilizing Maithili interrogative syntax, the translation oralizes the dense reasoning. It turns abstract philosophy back into a living spoken debate, retaining the intellectual combat of the original text. Returning this rigorous philosophy to its native regional language secures the afterlife of Indian realist thought. The logic remains as active and applicable today as it was 1,000 years ago.